Hello, and welcome to our IP and IC Working in Concert series, where we're going to look at using IC as an advanced data management and visualization toolkit for your IP wells. I'm going to take the next few minutes to talk about mapping zonal analysis results within IC using your interpreted IP data. To understand the potential variation within our zone of interest across our study area, it's important that we're able to select a range of data, be that text-based interpretation like fasces, or value-based like porosity, and display that directly on a map. These displays can directly impact the response to any anomaly identified across the area. Directly on the map within IC, we can generate plots to visualise data both in a gross fashion and in more detail. Highlighting any difference can easily lead to a deeper look at your well data. These breakdowns of data can lead to a better understanding of your fasces changes or reservoir distribution across your study area. Our IC toolkits can be accessed directly from IP through the Advanced Interpretation drop-down. Once you select IC, it opens up the IP-IC synchronization dialog, from where you can choose which wells are included, which curve sets are included, and which parameter sets are included with the sharing. We open up IC and we can see our wells quite clearly here on our base map. And this is where we can start looking deeper at our data. We can build up more detailed analysis looking at a particular zone. There are a few options when it comes to building this zonal analysis. We've called them bubbles. And you can choose components, average values, or sub or supercrop bubbles. These will plot directly on your map around the well location. Component bubbles allow you to choose your zone of interest based on your data types. So again, we can use our IP parameter sets, our tops, to choose which zone we're interested in. And we will then look at a particular parameter. For example, we can look at the breakdown of our lithologies, our interpreted lithologies, or our fasces interpretation for each of these zones. What we need to do is choose that data type. Some of the work that was done with regard to our IP input was using some of the standard utility tools. We were able to convert our fasces log into a text-based interpretation. And we are going to use that electrofasces for this next component bubble display. As you can see here, our key panel's telling us what each of our colours mean, and around each of our wells we can see the breakdown within our EV formation. You can see some of our bubbles here are incomplete, and this is highlighting to us areas in which our electrofasces do not cover the entire EV formation. From here we could go in and have a look deeper at the well to understand why we have missed some of this interpretation. We can go in and look directly at the data. For those of us more visual, we can choose a template. For example, here's a nice one here, it's a bit of everything. And this will allow us to look closer at the distribution of data relevant. So we have our tops here. So there's our EV in the green. And you can see our electrofasces. The information stops midway down the EV. Now, of course, you can go into edit mode and start modifying and adding new information here that will update on the chart. For example, let's add in an offshore interpretation. Obviously, in the real world, you might have more information and you'd pick something more fitting. But we can happily add in a new section that is then added to the database, which we can see on the map. This is all saved in the cache, so you can have a look and see what your new interpretation might represent on your map prior to saving it and committing it and sharing it back with IP. You might want to go back to IP and include more analysis and build up that fasces log separately and then push the results back. Beyond adding new interpretation, you can change the display to remove these gaps. We have the option to display the entire circle, the entire pie, based on the parameter we're using. So in this case, the electrofasces within the EV. rather than the EV extremes itself. This is really useful when working with core, and the chord interval does not cover the entire zone of interest. What else IC can add in this scenario is the ability to quickly step up and down through your stratigraphic units directly on the map, running the same zonal analysis. So you can see we have very limited interpretation within the Bessie formation here, and we have no interpretation in the Hawkins. As we step back down, beneath the Evie we have the Linda, which has a lot of offshore and a lot of distal lower shore face compared to the Evie, and the Jones looks very offshore and transition zone. So this helps you understand that paleo environment breakdown and distribution across your map. Beyond just looking at the zone in a gross capacity, we can go into the detail and understand whether we see the same information in blocky sections or whether they are more interbedded. And we can do that through the analysis sticks. So if we choose the same data as our inputs, we can then look at the vertical breakdown in a miniature plot. Within the EV are electrophases as a mini plot. So you can see we can manipulate the visuals of this, of course, and see them all relative. We have thicker sections to the west and some thinner sections to the east. You can see we have our proximal lower shore face to the later stages of our EV, and it's very distal to the bottom on the west and more inverted on the right. And again, we can step up and down through each of our units to see that vertical breakdown through each of the wells. And this is very helpful sometimes with the lithologies, so you have interbedded sands and shales, but on the bubble you can see it's 50-50. Are they mass sands or is it lots of interbeds? Very clear to see that directly on the map. Beyond looking at just the analysis sticks and the zonal breakdown with component bubbles, we can build an understanding of value-based data. So for example, within a zone, let's find out what our porosity values are. So within this zone, our average values will plot a relative size based on the value. Now beyond that, you can plot the values, which will tell you the source curve and the resultant average value. And as we step up and down, you see the values change based on the new zone. The last type of bubble is the subcrop, crop and supercrop. This is where we can determine, based on our event, be it the base of this interval, what is sitting directly beneath, whether that is a facies, a lithology, the formations. This is your choice to see what sits directly beneath, and it's very useful when it comes to identifying any massive unconformities on the map. So you can see the subcrop of the Evie. We have some offshore to the south and west and a lot of distal lower shore face. The Linda, offshore and transition zones. So again, this stratigraphic awareness makes this mapping very, very quick and easy to see. The supercrop is very much the same. You just choose what you want to see above that. So for this one, the Evie, we don't have anything above the Evie in these wells. Alright, so the supercrop of the Linda zone will be what's happening at the base of the Evie. So now that we've looked at this understanding and been able to ask our visual display of wells, what's happening with regard to the electrophases above my Linda, or what's happening with the formations at the base of the Evie? We can visualise that and see the geographic spread of our data. As I mentioned before, this is great when you're helping mapping out your paleo environments and that understanding of where your reservoir may or may not be. What we've gone through should have given you a taste of how IC can clearly display a whole suite of information directly on a map to help identify missing interpretation, highlight lateral variation across your study area, and help remove any concerns you may have regarding your interpretation. By building a bubble map, you can see how easy it can be to step through each stratigraphic zone to view that spatial as well as depth-based variation across your wells. Visualising this on a map can help identify which wells require that deeper look and give access to all the data to review and update directly. Thank you all for watching. If you have any questions or comments, or if you just want to be kept up to date with our latest news, please get in touch with the team or subscribe for updates by following the link.